Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jake Daly. Happy Friday, everyone. We got a good show for you today. Going to touch on Michigan State Athletic Director Alan Haller stepping down from his role. Going to go over kind of what that means for the state of Michigan State football. Also going to touch on Stanford. Can Stanford compete in this new NIL era? We're going to look at it. Also want to talk a little bit about Nebraska. They picked up a big-time quarterback commit from the 2027 class. Is Nebraska actually back on the rise? We're going to see. And then I want to touch on Big 12 quarterbacks. Make sure you stick around. I'm going to preview that, as well as preview Louisville's upcoming season. Before I get started on anything like that, though, I just want to remind everyone that this show is all about you. We love hearing your comments, questions, opinions, insights, anything you got. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. One easy way to ensure that your message gets on the air and read is to use the Super Chat feature. To do that, you can go and click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, type in your comment question there, and send that in. And this guarantees that your message gets read on the air. It's also just a great way to support our channel, support what we're doing here at GSMC. We can't do what we do without your ongoing support. We're so grateful to have y'all as a part of our community here. So the big news coming out from yesterday is Michigan State Athletic Director Alan Haller has stepped down from his role there. He's going to step down on May 11th at the end of the academic year. And this is a guy that he was still under contract through August 2026 of, obviously, next year. And he took over for Bill Beekman as the athletic director in September of 2021. So only in a role for a little under 4 years. Deputy athletic director Jennifer Smith, as well as longtime basketball coach Tom Izzo, they're going to serve as co-interim athletic directors. I thought that was kind of interesting. You normally see one person, but they're going to serve as co-athletic directors during the search for Haller's full-time replacement. And Alan Haller, this is a guy who grew up near Michigan State. He grew up in Lansing, played cornerback for the Spartans from 1988 to 1991. Also spent 3 seasons in the NFL. Graduated from J.W. Sexton High School in Lansing. Obviously, went on, stayed at home, played for Michigan State, went and had a successful career in the NFL, played a couple seasons, and then he comes back to Michigan State, actually joined the Michigan State Police Department starting in July 1997, spent 13 years as a police officer on Michigan State's campus, eventually rose to the rank of lieutenant, so got promoted a couple times, and then after that transitioned into joining the athletic department in 2010. So Haller began as an associate athletic director, then was promoted to senior associate athletic director in 2015, just kind of rose up the ranks, added chief of staff to his title in 2017, and then 2019, then athletic director Bill Beekman promotes him to his second in command as the deputy athletic director. And then obviously Beekman retires. He takes over in 2021. And this is a guy that has made a couple coaching hires throughout his tenure at Michigan State. So had a couple really good ones. He hired women's basketball coach Robin Freilich, hockey coach Adam Nightingale, men's tennis coach Harry Jadon. Those were all really successful hires, especially Freilich and Nightingale. They both have led their teams to the NCAA tournament the past 2 seasons. Nightingale, she won back-to-back Big Ten regular season championships and tournament titles the past 2 years as the hockey coach. Obviously, in men's basketball, you got Tom Izzo, who's always going to be great. This Spartans team didn't have as much talent for a normal Tom Izzo team, but they still made it to the Elite Eight. So this has been a successful program, but the big thing is football. you gotta win football. Obviously, he kind of dealt with the Mel Tucker situation in 2023 when he fired Mel Tucker for cause after university had investigated him for sexual misconduct complaints that were alleged by Brenda Tracy, who was a sexual assault awareness speaker, actually, who had been working with the team. Mel Tucker was fired for cause after getting a big-time extension, too, basically the year before, 2 years before. And then, obviously, Mel Tucker filed a wrongful termination lawsuit, so that's still pending against the school and the university. Also names Alan Haller in that lawsuit. But this is a guy that, while he clearly was a Michigan State homer, he didn't do the one big thing that they needed to, which was win football. Obviously, his big coaching hire was Jonathan Smith in 2023 after the Mel Tucker fiasco. And he made that decision on his own, he said. Didn't really have donor input, didn't really have any interference from the outside. And obviously, as the AD, that process, that decision is his prerogative. It's his choice. It's his decision to make, to do what he felt was best. And probably, honestly, was the beginning of the end for him. Even if Jonathan Smith does wind up having success as the head coach at Michigan State, making that hire on your own, kind of without the input of any of your boosters, anything like that, while can be good sometimes, it's going to put your tenure kind of on a rocky situation. So, University President Kevin Guskiewicz, he said that he would seek a new AD who can best navigate the changing landscape of collegiate athletics while working closely with both internal and external stakeholders to move Michigan State forward as a leader among the Power 4 institutions. That was basically his quote. What I think is really interesting about that is he said they can best navigate the changing landscape, and then the point here that he said where, while working closely with both internal and external stakeholders. Clearly, this is putting an emphasis on NIL, on investments into the Michigan State program that are coming from outside of the actual athletic department. Clearly, Alan Haller was a guy that cared deeply about Michigan State, right? Grew up in Lansing, went to high school in Lansing, went to Michigan State, worked there for 25, 30 years, refused to cut sports during his time as the AD, even while they're staring down the barrel of a new financial model, was offended when he was offered this swanky new office, while conditions for some athletes were really embarrassing at the Jensen Fieldhouse. So this is a guy that really cared deeply about Michigan State athletics and what was going on there. And also, he was hired when the school's coming out of pandemic, and the pandemic, it really brought athletic departments to their knees, made them struggle financially, and also this was a time when NIL was not nearly as developed, as lucrative as it is now. In that time, 2021, NIL still about, the Jolly Pumpkin restaurant, feeding offensive linemen, and getting monthly stipends from Matt Eshbia and United Wholesale Mortgage, right? It wasn't, hey, I need $750,000 to come play here. That wasn't what it was like when Alan Haller became the athletic director. And it really kind of seems like that was the big issue here, is that in terms of NIL, in terms of working with outside sources, external organizations, boosters, collectives, this was where Alan Haller really kind of struggled as the athletic director. And then Kevin Guskiewicz said this too. He was like, the next ADs, their top priorities, is going to be making sure that Michigan State football has the resources to contend in this new era. And also down the road, you're going to have to replace Tom Izzo, which is going to be a big story there, but obviously different sport. Right now, the reason he's not the athletic director anymore is because of football. This is all because of college football. of the Spartans struggling. They're really kind of losing ground in the state. Did have, obviously, when Mark D'Antonio left, they had a string of success, probably 2013, 14, 15, where they had some really solid teams. But as we've gotten into this NIL era, Michigan State just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. No one's really looking at them as a power in the Big Ten right now. Even in state, the Wolverines are clearly the dominant force there. If Michigan State wants to get back to competing, wants to do what's right, they have to invest in football, and in that program, in NIL deals. And that seems really to be the main reason that Alan Haller is no longer the athletic director. I'm kind of curious as to what direction Michigan State's going to go in terms of finding a new AD, especially because of the timing of this. He's stepping down at the end of the academic year. So it's also going to be a time where sitting athletic directors could potentially be in contention for this job. I'm curious if they have a specific target in mind right now. I'm also wondering, how much was this forced upon Haller by the university? I think it's probably a decent chunk of time. It might have been something where you go, hey, you're going to step down or we're going to fire you. And also, it is storming here right now. I don't know if anybody can hear that, but if it comes across, that's what's going on in the background right now. But we're going to see what happens with Michigan State, with Alan Haller. Will he end up being the AD somewhere else? I could see it at a smaller school, but this is also a guy that was an MSU lifer, so I'm not really sure about that. But they're clearly targeting somebody who can navigate the ins and outs of the NIL world, of this new booster-driven, collective-driven, football-driven world of athletics. So we're going to see what Michigan State does, but Alan Haller is officially out as the Michigan State athletic director. So right now we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about Stanford and kind of the state of the Stanford program. Can they compete in this new era, similar to Michigan State? But we will talk about it when we come back, and we're going to take a short break here on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. I'm hoping that this storm in the background is not coming through. I have a feeling it might be, so bear with me. We're going to try to get through it together. So just talked a little bit about Michigan State and kind of their state of the program, the athletic director stepping down there at the university. Want to touch now on Stanford and kind of just what's going on there. This is a really interesting situation because Stanford is a unique school. But before I talk about any of that, I just want to remind everyone, this show is all about you. We love hearing your comments, questions, opinions, insights. And we want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. So one way to do that is to use the super chat feature. To do that, you can click the $ in the bottom of the chat box to ensure that your message gets on the air, gets read that way. It's also just a great way to support our show, support what we're trying to do here at the GSMC network. We can't do what we do without your ongoing support. We're so grateful to have you all as a part of our community here. So I want to talk a little bit about Stanford now, and kind of just, can they even compete in this new era of college football? So I want to give a good example of a different sport from Stanford first. So last July, they had a softball star pitcher, Najari Kennedy. It was announced that she was leaving Stanford, which is a perennial power in the sport of softball. She was leaving Stanford for Texas Tech, which was basically an afterthought in softball right now. But she got $1 million from Texas Tech to leave that Stanford program. And this is something that really shocked Stanford fans, alumni, and a bunch of people just around that kind of university. It was pretty much a commonly held assumption for a long time that there's not a lot of athletes who would voluntarily leave behind a prestigious Stanford degree, obviously one of the great universities in America. And this was always kind of the thought, like, hey, there's not going to be a lot of kids that want to leave here just because of the quality of school, quality of education. But again, this is a brand new era. She got $1 million to go to Texas Tech, which is an unheard of number outside of football, men's basketball. And then you also have Stanford coaches, their head coaches, they were prevented from discussing any NIL deals with their athletes until April of 2024. Mind you, the NCAA allowed athletes to get NIL compensation starting in July of 2021. So basically for 3 whole years, Stanford coaches and their athletes could not talk NIL deals. 3 seasons, 3 years in which they were completely left behind all of the other power schools and programs across the country, essentially. One former athletics administrator, they were quoted by saying, "Arrogance is prevalent across college athletics, but the level of arrogance at Stanford is unique." There were so many Stanford people who were like, how could she possibly leave for money? And this is just one example of a bunch of the setbacks that Stanford athletics has occurred in recent history. Mind you, Stanford has the most championships in NCAA history across all of their sports. But this school could be being left behind right now because of this era. You have your 3 most visible sports in football and men's and women's basketball, and they have struggled mightily in the NIL era. Big-time athletes, they're commanding 7-figure deals per year. They can transfer at will. Football, they haven't been to a bowl game since 2015. So basically, in a decade, Stanford has not been to a bowl game. They've had 4 straight seasons of 3 and 9 years. Men's basketball, they last played in the NCAA tournament in 2014. And women's basketball, they just saw their streak of 36 consecutive national NCAA tournament bids. It just got snapped. So you have your 3 most important sports, and they're all struggling really poorly, right? So obviously there are other sports, there are Olympic sports, they're still thriving. The Cardinal are number 1 in Directors' Cup standings, which that's kind of qualifies all athletics and sports. And they have 36 total sports, which is tied with Ohio State for the most in the country at the FBS level. In the 2024 Olympic Games, Stanford led the country, led universities with 59 Olympians from their school. But they've had issues, right? Stanford, from the dissolvement of the Pac-12, they're an hour away from the Pacific Coast. They now play in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And not only that, they had to take a pay cut to find a home in the ACC. They're not getting as much revenue as other schools in the conference. And then you just have that big hole that they dug themselves in, where they didn't talk NIL for 3 years. 3 seasons in which these other programs, these other schools are getting valuable experience, are growing, developing, cultivating their NIL resources and these deals, and kind of getting a game plan of how they're going to operate in this new era. Stanford hasn't done any of that up to this point. And now they're just starting to. They're trying to get it going now. In the past couple months, President Jonathan Levin hired, obviously, Andrew Luck. This is the big story. Andrew Luck, general manager of the football program. And this is Andrew Luck. We've always known this. This is a guy that's crazy off the smart, intelligent, just off the charts, wildly intelligent, one of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL when he played, a guy that was an architect coming out of Stanford, and a guy that knows what he's talking about, right? So Andrew Luck has acknowledged the mistakes that have been made in this NIL era, and kind of pledged to go all in on revenue sharing. Jonathan Levin, the president, he has said that Stanford plans to continue kind of their unique tradition of student athletes who excel in the classroom and on the field. But mind you, it was only a decade ago that Stanford reached 3 Rose Bowls in 4 seasons. 2012, 2013, 2015, they got to the Rose Bowl each time. That was obviously under David Shaw, who had replaced Jim Harbaugh, And you had guys like Andrew Luck, Christian McCaffrey, Toby Gerhardt, that's a good name. Legitimate athletes, legitimate NFL prospects. From 2010 to 2018, Stanford was the marquee game on game day 7 times. So basically once a season, they were the top matchup in the country on one of the weeks. Knocked off top 2 Oregon teams in both 2012 and 2013. Their 2013 game against Oregon, it was played on a Thursday night. It had a sold-out home crowd, and that was when they had the Nerd Nation glasses. Most of the students are repping them. But you look at them now, 3-9 in 4 straight seasons. Student section practically non-existent. David Shaw stepped down in 2022. His replacement, Troy Taylor, just got fired. Now you have an interim coach in Frank Reich. It's really going to be difficult for Stanford to kind of recover from what has happened in the past few seasons. And success in football is really important for them to fund these non-revenue sports, their Olympic sports that are clearly their better sports right now. The athletic department is running a deficit in 2022-2023, which were their last publicly available figures. They ran a $21 million deficit, even with $56 million in endowment, payouts in university support. It also just made only $9.5 million in ticket sales. If you look at a decade earlier when football was good, they made $16.8 million, right, in those seasons. And that's 10 years ago too. So you adjust for inflation, this Stanford program really is in a rut. It's going to be interesting kind of how they change this. So Stanford, Andrew Luck too, he pretty much has free reign. He doesn't report to the athletic director. He reports to university president Jonathan Levin. He has control over the program. He's the one that fired Troy Taylor. It wasn't the athletic director. It was Andrew Luck. He's got full control over what happens with football, and it sounds like they're going to give him kind of the reins and let him try to sort this thing out. A lot of people, so this was a big story in the Athletic. They had interviewed a lot of people close to the university. Most of the people that they had interviewed, they spoke to, they said that Stanford's late start was probably falling at the feet of former president Mark Tessier-Levine, as well as former provost Preston Strell. They both stepped down in 2023. Tessier-Levine, he had resigned following allegations of involvement in scientific research papers with fabricated results. But those two were seen as really unsupportive, if not adversarial, to athletics. And then you look back at 2020 when the school attempted to cut 11 sports teams with 240 total athletes, amid the financial strains of COVID. This obviously had a big backlash. It would have saved the school about $8 million a year, but it was reversed because the alumni base, fundraising efforts by an advocacy group, they kind of squashed that. And even if they had kind of embraced NIL sooner, this is a school that would struggle to compete in the transfer portal. So, for example, in 2023, which is when Deion Sanders arrived at Colorado, he signed 53 transfers for his football team in 2023. That same year, that same time, Stanford accepted 57 transfers. Not to the football team, to the entire university. So 57 total transfers compared to 53 football-only transfers. The academic requirements at Stanford, it's really difficult for them to accept people that are not of a certain quality, and they also don't really have any special rules. Athletes, they don't normally live together. A lot of times they dorm with non-athletes, and there is a really big clash too between the athletes and the non-athletes. There is an athlete-only dining space, but not, a lot of the just students, they really kind of resent that. It's very tense compared to other universities where obviously the students kind of know that the athletes, they're going to get special privileges, they're going to live in nicer dorms, they're going to have better food. That's just kind of the status quo. But that's not how it is for Stanford. So trying to keep that kind of going, that culture, as well as how are you going to bring in transfers? How are you going to kind of regulate NIL deals? These are all really big questions that Andrew Luck and Stanford, they're going to have to answer really soon if they want a chance to get back and try to compete and be a power forward program that can make some noise eventually. This is a unique school. It's a unique situation. I think if Andrew Luck kind of leans into that, might be able to get some recruits, some transfers that really kind of like that idea. But it's going to be a Herculean task. I'm not sure if Stanford really will get back. I think if there's anybody that can do it, it is Andrew Luck. But we're going to see what's going to happen here. I think they are one of the more interesting case studies that's going to play out in the next couple seasons of what actually is going to happen at Stanford. So we're going to take another short break on the show right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about 2027 quarterback commit Trey Taylor committing to Nebraska. And does this mean Nebraska might be back or back on the rise? I don't know. We're going to talk about it. But we will be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Friday, May 2nd. Talked a little about Stanford. Gonna talk about a big quarterback pickup for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So, Trey Taylor, 2027 quarterback out of Mundelein, Illinois, has officially become the first player committed to Nebraska in this 2027 cycle, giving his verbal pledge roughly 20 months before he's actually eligible to sign. Second quarterback prospect in this class that has pledged, besides Ohio State pledge Brady Edmonds. So he chose Nebraska over Illinois, over LSU, and Texas A&M. Those were the other finalists. And Trey Taylor is also the son of former Eastern Illinois running back star J.R. Taylor, who he ran for 51 touchdowns as a college teammate of Tony Romo from about 99 to 2002. So, athletic dad comes from an athletic family, and this is a kid that started as a sophomore at Carmel Catholic High School, threw for 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions this past season. Commitment, he just spent a bunch of time with quarterback coach Glenn Thomas, as well as starting QB Dylan Raiola during his latest visit to Nebraska. So despite his early pledge, I thought this was really interesting. Trey Taylor has already had a lengthy recruitment, even as a sophomore. He's estimated that he's visited as many as 70 college campuses since attending college camps as a 6th grader. First of all, attending college camps as a 6th grader is insane, right? I mean, you're like 11 years old, 12, somewhere around there. But still, you're like 11 years old, 12 years old, and you're attending college camps already. That's pretty insane. He got his first Division I offer in 7th grade from Maryland. This is a kid that he's a smooth thrower, got a really nice throwing motion. I would hope so if you've been attending college camps since you were in 6th grade. Also has really solid footwork. Accuracy is pretty on point, and this is going to be some of the big strengths of Trey Taylor's game. This is why he was a top quarterback prospect in this class. And so, obviously, he's nearly 2 years out from being able to sign, but he said he doesn't intend to visit other campuses besides Nebraska. He said he will continue contact with other programs. We'll see. I mean, he's obviously still going to be a top target for Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Illinois, LSU. They all kind of seem to be in the mix. He's a 2027 quarterback. You know, these guys have plenty of time to change, to flip. We're going to see if he actually does stick with Nebraska. A guy that is really cerebral, has the footwork and the motions to kind of work through anything, displays the ability to distribute at a really high level, especially when the pocket heats up, calm under pressure. But he's at his best when he's playing in a structured environment, when he gets a clean pocket, and he has a sturdy base to kind of attack that intermediate, deeper part of the field. Also is a dynamic mover. I wouldn't say he's a super strong scrambler, but a dynamic enough mover that he's able to extend plays when there's pressure in his face. Did post a losing record as a starter, which I think is a little bit of a concern, but his game tape kind of paints a different picture. He hits his marks with authority. He's able to kind of layer the ball throughout the different levels, able to throw it every step of the way. Also grew an inch between freshman and sophomore year, so we'll see if he can still kind of fill out his frame, pushing about 6'3" right now. But this is a guy that he's going to have to keep fine-tuning those mechanics, but already has a really strong base of mechanics. A guy that can definitely be a high-caliber distributor for a Power 4 program, and a guy that, if he does stay there, can replace Dylan Raiola right away. Dylan Raiola's got another 2 seasons. He could come in after that. I'm really curious to see how Nebraska's going to do this upcoming season. So they do have first-year offensive coordinator Dana Holgorsen, obviously former head coach at Houston, at West Virginia, a guy that attracts an audience just with his wit, overall personality. Also brought in new special teams coordinator in Mike Eckler, who he's a bundle of energy. He's always kind of ready. He had been around Nebraska for a long time, came back as the special teams coordinator now. And then you also have head coach Matt Rule, who he's kind of been known across the game for his ambassadorship, willingness to embrace fun within the college environment. Had a big coaching shuffle this year. 6 new coaches, 8 are in new roles. John Butler's probably the most overlooked as the defensive coordinator, but this is the guy that he could be the perfect dude to kind of give Nebraska some of that swag, some of that charisma back. He was promoted to replace Tony White. Tony White left for Florida State to become the defensive coordinator there after 2 seasons. And this is kind of intriguing. Butler only has 1 year as a DC at a major college or NFL level, but he could potentially be the key to driving some momentum there. Also, I thought this was really interesting on the flip side. So Matt Rule had said that they weren't going to do a spring game. Well, then he comes in at basically the 11th hour, says, oh, we're going to have like a spring showcase kind of thing, right? If you look at his first 2 spring games there, they attracted over 60,000 fans, right, at Nebraska. This year, they had 7 or 8,000. Some said it was up to 10, but still, you go from 60,000 each season to 7 or 8,000. Nebraska fans are known for their dedication. They pack Memorial Stadium every home game, travel to away games, bowl games. They've even set the spring game attendance record. In 2018, there were 86,000 fans that attended their spring game. This is a state of a fan base that loves and lives, breathes football. It's just true. It's always how it has been, right? 86,000 fans at a spring game kind of tells you that, right? But this flip to actually do have a scaled down scrimmage, it really didn't move the needle at all. There obviously was nobody there. It kind of even showed that the Nebraska Cornhusker volleyball scrimmage between Nebraska and Kansas, that may have outdrawn the actual football spring game, and which is insane when you look at this is a school that set the spring game attendance record in 2018, 87,000 fans at a spring game, and this year you have 7 to 8,000 fans. That's it. That's it's crazy to me, especially when you look at this Nebraska fan. What actually they did on Saturday too. They didn't really have a scrimmage. Here's what Nebraska fans drove to Memorial Stadium for. They had a flag football game. They had $50 tours of the sports complex center, a garage sale of Husker memorabilia, a tractor pull, a roping contest with a fake horse and a fake steer, and a skills competition. That was the extent of the Nebraska spring game. If I was a Nebraska fan, I would be like, are you kidding me? I came here to watch these guys play tug of war, especially when they weren't even going to have a spring game in the first place. So at that point, just don't have a spring game, right? Just don't even do one. On the field, though, this is also a team that in 2023 on defense, they were 17th in yards per play allowed in the country, 5th in the Big Ten in that category. And then last season, 2024, they slipped to 52nd nationally, 10th in the Big Ten in yards per play allowed. So you have to come back. You have to revamp on that defense. Again, Nebraska, this is a historically proud program. I mean, 3 national titles from 1994 to 1997. Tom Osborne's teams were incredible. That entire time he was the head coach. 43 conference championships throughout their history. And literally, they've sold out their stadium, which I think this is more to the fan base's credit. They have sold out their stadium for 403 consecutive home games, dating back to November 3rd of 1962. That's before JFK was assassinated. That Nebraska fans have been selling out that stadium longer than literally JFK was assassinated after that time. It's unbelievable. They had a team that they started off really strong last year. Started off 5-1, then had a 4-game losing streak. So they ended up at 7-6 overall. I wonder, can they actually make a jump this year? I'm really curious to see how Dylan Raiola is going to perform in year 2. Skid that threw for 2,800 yards, only had 13 touchdowns though, had 11 interceptions, did complete about 67% of his passes, but that interception total, the low touchdown number, he really kind of fell off at the end of the year. Will he be more comfortable, more ready in year 2? I think if he does take a big step, we'll see if Nebraska does as well. They're kind of in that middle tier of Big Ten teams right now. I think they're kind of in the same spot as a few other programs there, but their season could go one of two ways. I am curious to see, will Dylan Raiola perform well, elevate this team to potentially 8-9 win season? Because if they do, they have some forward momentum, positive momentum, going into the upcoming seasons, able to kind of refocus on what makes Nebraska special, this fan base, their love of football, just the all-in going in on Nebraska football. If they can kind of refocus, retool, show recruits and transfers that, hey, this is what makes this place special, they could potentially be up again in 3 to 5 years. I don't know. I don't think this is going to be a big tipping point year, I think, for Nebraska. If we see regression, could we see Matt Rule be fired? I don't really think that's true. But if they do drop to like a 5-win team, what happens there? They have a really big range, I think, of outcomes, potential outcomes for this upcoming season. I hated the fact, though, that they only had 7,000 fans at their spring game. That's crazy to me. So right now, we're going to take another short break on the show. When we come back, we're going to preview ACC team. We're going to go preview the Louisville Cardinals, see what their season could look like this upcoming year. But we will be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. It's sunny again. The rain stopped. Thank God. We're going good. Having a good show today. Going to talk a little bit about Louisville right now and what their season could maybe look like. So, you got year 3 under head coach and program legend Jeff Brom came over from Purdue to take over his alma mater. And under Jeff Brom, the Louisville team has been solid. Cardinals are 19-8 in the past 2 years. They've been really close. They have to avoid the clunker this year, though. Last season, they lost to 3-9 Stanford, and 2023, they lost 3-9 Pitt. So both years, they've kind of had an oopsies game that's dropped them out of contention. But this is a team where returning production is really good. Transfer portal has been solid for them. And it could be their time to really jump up as an ACC contender, as a player, basically. Spring transfer portal deadline passed. They kind of escaped with not too much damage. They did lose Austin Collins, who's a big lineman for them. Lost a couple tight ends, but for the most part, pretty successful. Retained the core of their team. And again, this is a Jeff Brom offense. Brian Brom's offensive coordinator. We know this is going to be a successful offense just based on the years of watching these guys work in this system. Passing game's going to be efficient. They have another transfer quarterback coming in Miller Moss, former USC guy. He's going to take over for Tyler Shuck. Probably not the same caliber as Tyler Shuck, but I think he's definitely at least a little better than Jack Plummer, who was their transfer QB 2 seasons ago. I also love this running back room for Louisville. You have Isaac Brown, true sophomore, who burst on the scene last season as a freshman. 1,100 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns, 7 yards per carry. Also had 30 receptions last year. And then you pair him with a guy that's just as explosive, a bigger back in Duke Watson, who on only 67 carries last year, had nearly 600 rushing yards, 8.9 yards per carry for Duke Watson. Both these guys also had their highest run, their longest runs were really high numbers. Isaac Brown, 77 was his long last year. Duke Watson was long of 68. So both these guys, stud running backs. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Duke Watson also really came on strong at the end of the year. At Stanford, these games were both in November. At Stanford, had 11 carries for 117 yards, 3 touchdowns. At Kentucky, had 6 carries for 104 yards, 2 touchdowns. Both those games were 2 of the last couple games of the season for Louisville. So this room, they're heading into the 2025 season. I think it's one of the better duos in the country. Watson's arguably the more explosive back. Brown obviously produced more last year, but they're both going to be there. That's going to be a really exciting tandem for Louisville. Wide receiver is going to be interesting. They also have a pretty solid 1-2 punch here in Chris Bell, who took another big step forward in 2024, returns in 2025 as one of the top wideouts in the ACC, constant deep threat. And then Colin Lacey also, he's coming back, had a redshirt last year, showed what he could do in the Sun Bowl. Also showed out in the spring game, had 99 receiving yards, receiving touchdown. The position just got better too in the portal. Antonio Meeks had a great spring, appears to have finally kind of made the adjustment to the power conference level, as well as they bring in Dakari Collins from North Carolina State, kind of bolster that room. Tight end is a question mark here. Third leading receiver from last season, Mark Redmond, graduated, so that room's a little thin right now. Looks like they're really going to rely more on the wide receivers in the passing game. And then the O-line, they're kind of in overhaul right now. They have a lot to live up for because the Louisville line last season really did a great job in all areas and aspects. Pass pro especially was terrific. They got in a transfer from Mississippi State, Michaelan Pounders. He might step in at left tackle, and definitely in contention there. Right tackle should be fine if Rashid Miller can stay healthy. He got a lot of run last year at that right tackle position, then got hurt midway through the year. But he seemed to kind of carry his momentum throughout the spring, so should lock down that right tackle position. Center is really going to be their anchor. They bring back Pete Nigra, who started all last year. He was the highest graded player in 2024 of all their returners on the offensive line. So should be a guy that's going to be the leader of that unit. And then obviously you lose Austin Collins to the portal. Nair Jackson, he got a bunch of run during spring ball, so he looked the part pretty well. He should have one of those guard positions. But how that unit kind of meshes, that's going to be really interesting to watch, especially after they performed so well in 2024. Defense, they're going to be interesting. They should be pretty good, though. You're losing Ashton Gillette on the line. Bring in Coastal Carolina transfer Cleve Lubin. He could potentially replicate that 9.5 sack season from last year, but this is a guy that was one of the top players to enter the portal. Landing him was a really, really big win for Louisville. And while he is a game wrecker, more often than not, it was actually Adonijah Green, who's a redshirt sophomore, who is teaming with NFL level potential. He ran with the ones more often than not in open practices. Time is going to kind of tell how that battle shapes out, but both those guys look really promising on the defensive edge. Tackles, D-tackle combination of Jordan Garrard, Renee Conga, those are going to be some solid guys. That's a strength of this Louisville team right now. They are losing Desmond Tell and Jared Dawson, but those two guys that they still have, they really should have an impact in the middle of that line. Conga was slowed at times by injury last year, but he was much better than a lot of people anticipated. And then Garrard as well, he kind of flew under the radar last year, and then he really picked it up at the end of last season. He missed most of the first half of the season due to injury, but as that second half progressed, he really came on, became an impact playmaker. So you have those two guys at defensive tackle that should kind of anchor the middle of that D-line. Linebacker-wise, they're in a good spot here. you got leading tackler TJ Quinn to come back. Has made 174 stops over the past 2 years. A guy that's going to be a big part of this defense for them. This is a big deal that he returned. One thing he's going to have to work on is his coverage skills, coverage abilities. Really kind of focused on that in the spring. We're going to see if coverage improves from TJ Quinn in 2025. And then, while TJ Quinn was their leading tackler, if you ask Louisville fans, a lot of them will probably say Stanquan Clark. He is the guy that's the best returning player on defense for them. This is a dude on the outside as an outside linebacker that has the upside to really grow into a star. And now it's just kind of up to him to showcase that. He needs to clean up his coverage as well, but this is a guy that's extremely athletic, really versatile defender. Should be exciting to watch for the Cardinal this year. Secondary is going to be a big question mark here. So last year, their secondary wasn't awful, but when they struggled, bad things happened. And now they're going to have to replace a bunch of guys again. Cornerback is clearly the question mark here. They lost top 5 players at that position, including all ACC corner, Quincy Riley. So there's going to be depth concerns here. Who's going to step up? It's going to be really interesting. There were a couple things to like in the spring, though, out of that unit. Rodney Johnson Jr., who transferred in from Southern, he really looked the part of a cornerback 1 for them. So you have him kind of penciled in as a starter preliminary right now. And then you also have young guys, Ramon Mosby, Antonio Harris, who are a redshirt freshman and freshman respectively. They really held their own despite being very young. So I think those guys will probably get playing time. How quickly they adjust, how many mistakes they make that just young guys make, that's going to be kind of what will showcase what this cornerback room can do. This is the big question mark here, is the cornerback room. Safety room, there's also some question marks there. They do lose a pair of quality safeties in Tamarian McDonald and MJ Griffin, but they're in much better shape at safety than they are at cornerback. Brought in JoJo Evans from FIU. Wouldn't be a surprise if this is the most impactful transfer for Louisville. This was a guy that at FIU was an all-conference USA defender, one of the top DBs in the group of 5 level. Exciting prospect, should step into a starting role. Also, don't count out D'Angelo Hutchinson. He came off of breakout 2024 season, probably will be moving into a starting role. Both those guys there should be solid contributors for Louisville. But so last year, Louisville was 7-0 when they allowed quarterbacks to hit fewer than 65% of their passes. Yet they were 2-4 when they allowed that or more. So really, the secondary here is going to be a big thing. It could determine how successful Louisville is. We're going to see. I think that's the big question mark here. Looking at their schedule, I think it's a pretty solid schedule. So, first month of the season, I would say, you have Eastern Kentucky, win. James Madison, win. Bowling Green, win. You go on September 27th at Pitt. They should win that game. Depends on how Pitt improves. I could see it being a toss-up, though. You go into a road situation, you haven't had a road game yet. I think it's a toss-up, but I think they win. At that point, they're 4-0. Go into Virginia. They have Virginia next week at home. They win that game, I think. So you're 5-0 going into your bye on October 11th. Then October 17th, you have a big game at Miami. I actually am picking Louisville for this game. Here's why. I think they're going to have that bye the weekend before. They're going most likely to be undefeated unless they kind of slip up against one of those programs. But so say they're undefeated, they're 5-0, they have a bye week going into that Miami game. I think they can beat Miami then, just with the confidence level. So I have them at 6-0. Then I have them losing to Boston College, actually. I think after that Miami game, you get super hyped up for it. It's a come down. You are at home against Boston College, but I think that could be a game where they maybe lose, just take the focus off the ball. Virginia Tech, they got to play at them. That's going to be a toss-up, I think. Virginia Tech really kind of did not live up to expectations last year, just as a program, as well as their quarterback, Kyron Jones. And then I think they win that game, though. They have Clemson at home in November. Then they have to play at SMU. Then they have Kentucky at home. Those are their last 3 games of the season. That's a really tough slot. I think that last month, it's going to depend on how Louisville is before. If they're like 7-8-1 going into that Louisville game, I think it's certainly possible that they just have that, or going into the Clemson game, going into the Louisville game. Going into the Clemson game, if they're like 8-1, I think it's certainly possible that they roll through Clemson at SMU and then Kentucky at home. Right now, though, I have them as a 9-3 team. I think they're kind of going to be in that similar position that they have been in the past 2 seasons under Jeff Brom, where they're right there as an ACC contender, but may not break through that ceiling just yet. So right now we're going to take our last break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk some quarterbacks and talk about some of the Big 12 starting quarterbacks. That's a loaded conference for quarterbacks right now. But we're going to get into that shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just touched on Louisville, what their season could look like. Gonna talk a little bit about some quarterbacks now. Everybody's favorite position. I want to look at some of the Big 12 starting quarterbacks. I'm not gonna rank them, and here's why. This is a loaded conference for quarterbacks. I was looking at the list, and there's 10 to 12 quarterbacks that I really like. I think it's really hard to kind of rank them. So I'm not going to rank them. I'm just going to kind of talk about them, talk about their strengths, weaknesses, what could potentially happen. Sam Leavitt is my first guy on my list. If I had to pick my favorite quarterback from the Big 12, I think it's probably Sam Leavitt. This is a guy that's a gamer. Was projected to be a star at Michigan State, then obviously went to Arizona State last season, helped them to a Big 12 title, to the college football playoff. A guy that has completed, doesn't have huge stats, right? But this is a guy that's just a gamer, feisty quarterback, mobile, experienced, a guy that is going to be the star of that attack this year in Kenny Dillingham's system. I love the offense that Kenny Dillingham runs. Obviously, he is going to lose Cam Scatabo, but you still have your main wide receiver, Jordan Tyson, coming back. You are expected to be the engine of that offense. I'm curious to see what Sam Leavitt's follow-up season will be like this year. I really like him as a quarterback. I think he can improve in his accuracy. Only has completed about 62% of his passes over 2 seasons. Doesn't have huge stats, right? 3,000 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. But a guy that is a gamer. He wins ball games. The leader as a quarterback. I love that kind of quarterback, the moxie, the ability to make tough plays, and when it counts. I think that's what Sam Leavitt can do. I'm excited to see him as the quarterback of Arizona State again this year. Excuse me. Another guy I really like and am looking forward to of what he can potentially do is Avery Johnson from Kansas State, a guy that hasn't had great stats, but exciting, super exciting, a guy that's a rising superstar, has kind of become the franchise guy, the face of the program for the Kansas State Wildcats, and he's still learning as a quarterback, but last year, first year as a full-time starter, took his game up several notches. A guy that's a dual threat guy, has 900 rushing yards in his career, 14 rushing touchdowns. He was kind of used a lot in sub packages even when Will Howard was there, but this is year 2 of the Avery Johnson show. This is his team. If he can take kind of even more steps in his progression, especially as a passer, as he's only completed 58% of his passes, if he can improve his decision making, improve his accuracy a little bit, this is a guy that can launch into a national star. A guy that I think probably has the highest ceiling in this conference as a quarterback, in terms of raw ability, in terms of potential upside. Avery Johnson is going to be the guy to look for out of these quarterbacks, I think. I'm curious to see what's going to happen with him. It also sounded like Tennessee really kind of wanted him, but Kansas State guys, there was an official from the Kansas State program that said, "We built a wall around Avery Johnson. They are not letting him leave there in Manhattan." Speaking of another guy that Tennessee reportedly targeted, Josh Hoover from TCU. This is a guy that's not a runner at all, but last year he showed that he can throw a heck of a football, right? Had a breakthrough season as the starter at TCU. Numbers are going to be great again in a loaded TCU offense. Obviously was targeted in the spring portal, but stuck with TCU, will be their quarterback again this year. And last year was the best quarterback in the Big 12 stats-wise. 3,900 passing yards, 67% completion, 27 touchdowns. Did have 11 interceptions, so is going to need to cut down on those numbers. But a guy that put up huge numbers in 24 should put up really big numbers again in 25 for the Horned Frogs. I'm excited to see what Josh Hoover can do. And then another guy, Jalen Daniels, Kansas, a guy that at certain points had Heisman hopes, the 5-year starter, guy that has been injured a lot. That's going to be the one thing here. Also had a change at offensive coordinator last season. Andy Kotelnicki, he went to Penn State to take over the offense there. Kansas, he just had a rough 2024 season in general. So, lost his offensive coordinator. Kansas didn't really have a true home game. He kind of played like all the pressure in the world was on his shoulders. It was basically like it was all on him for Kansas to be successful. So really didn't seem like he was just playing loose, playing confident. And this is a guy that he's going to have Jim Zembrowski taking over the offense coordinator duties, guy that's been around the Kansas program, been around Lance Leopold, should improve that offense there, bring a little more continuity, and also a guy that's had injury concerns throughout his career. Didn't participate in the spring, wasn't a full participant, underwent a knee procedure. So can he actually get healthy? He had an injury-plagued 24 season. He's missed time in a lot of the other years he started. I think that's going to be one of the big issues is if Jalen Daniels is healthy, this is a kid that's a super exciting quarterback, so fun to watch. Can take that Kansas attack to the next level. It's just, is Jalen Daniels going to be healthy? Will the new scheme help him out? I think those are going to be the two really big things with Jalen Daniels. I love watching him. He's just an exciting guy to watch when everything's kind of clicking, but big question marks surrounding him this upcoming year. Another guy that's kind of flown under the radar, Rocco Beck from Iowa State. And over 2 seasons, this is a kid that's completed like 6,700 yards of passing, 48 touchdowns. He's sort of been glossed over just because all of the star power that's kind of in this conference in terms of quarterbacks has put together back-to-back years of over 3,000 yards. He did have NFL talent at wide receiver, had Jaden Higgins, had Jalen Noel to work with, but still the guy that's getting them the ball, distributing, still the main point of attack is Rocco Becht. One of the more prolific passers in the league last season, had 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns. Again, is going to be near the top of the conference. We'll see how Iowa State is, especially he's going to lose Higgins and Noel. What will his wide receiver room look like? Is that going to kind of affect his game? I think those are going to be the big storylines there for the Cyclones and for Rocco Becht. Another guy, though, too, Caden Salter, going to come in at Colorado to replace Shedeur Sanders. And this is a guy that Caden Salter is not Shedeur Sanders throwing the ball. Let's make that clear. Shedeur is a much better passer. He did throw for 32 passing yards actually in 2023. Had a much better 2023 season than 2024 season for Liberty. But while he's not as good of a passer, he is far, far more dangerous on the move as a runner, as a guy that can get outside the pocket and escape pressure. Much more dangerous and evasive than Shedeur Sanders in that aspect. Caden Salter should be the starter for a year, and then the program turns it over to Juju Lewis. But I'm curious to see what happens with Caden Salter here and how kind of Colorado's offense fits around him. They also have a retooled wide receiver room, so how's that going to work out with Colorado there? They're going to be interesting to watch. Jake Retzlaff, BYU. Again, this is another guy not as talented as some of the other Big 12 quarterbacks, and for sure, but a guy that's a playmaker who multiple times has shown his toughness, has shown up in clutch situations, does make a lot of mistakes, has had 15 interceptions over the past couple of years, but does make it up for a lot of big plays. He's got a loaded receiver core this year. Strong focus is going to be finishing stronger in 2025, winning the Big 12. They have the talent for it on BYU's roster, but he threw 2 TDs and 3 interceptions in 4 November games last year, so kind of struggled down the stretch. Will he be able to finish stronger, maintain that momentum for BYU, and potentially secure them a conference title? It's very possible. That's going to be the big thing here. Another guy, this is the last guy I'm really going to preview, Devin Dampier, Utah. Utah, this is a really big signing, possibly by anyone in the conference this offseason. Didn't really get a lot of attention either. Devin Dampier from New Mexico, he could be the difference between what Utah was last year, where they're mediocre, and what they were, the past years before that when Cam Rising was healthy, and they were legit Big 12 contender, college football playoff contender. This can be the difference for Utah. Devin Dampier, exciting guy, dual threat quarterback, 1,500 rushing yards over the past 2 seasons. They really heavily invested in Devin Dampier this year. And also, they brought in his offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, who's going to run the offense. So Dampier steps into the same offense, has a more talented roster around him. Is going to be really exciting to watch at Utah, I think. Definitely a clear upgrade from some of their other options that they have had to run out the past year or two. And then some other guys too. Noah Fafita, Arizona. He could really have a bounce back year. Struggled in 24, but had a great 23 season. Sawyer Robertson, Baylor. He's not a bad quarterback in his own right. Bear Morton, Texas Tech. These guys are all really great quarterbacks as well. And any one of them can kind of jump up into that top 5 of these quarterbacks in the Big 12. But this is a league that is loaded with quarterback potential, star power, watchability. Big 12 is going to be a lot of fun, and just watching these guys and how they kind of operate this upcoming year. So we are going to end our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please remember to subscribe, follow the show, and if you want, you can also follow Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter for even more sports content, more sports updates that you love. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to